So I'll just give a quick intro of Erin for anyone that doesn't know. She's a sports broadcaster. She's a TV host. She currently works for the Tennis Channel, and she's also covered football. I know that's been a big portion of your career, and X Games. She's now getting into being really interested in advocating for mental health and opening up that conversation, particularly as it relates to athletes and former athletes. And I'm really excited that we get to have a little bit of a talk. And I want to hear about your journey. And I've seen you, so I've known you about 2 years, yeah? And I've seen you like grow incredibly in the 2 years that I've known you. And I've seen mostly what I've noticed is there's been a big softening and opening. And just curious to know, are there some catalysts or some pivotal moments or some things that have led you to open in the way that you have and grow the way that you have?
Well, first of all, thank you for seeing that in me. That means a lot because, yes, we've known each other for 2 years. We've been in some really beautiful experiences together where my main intention was to soften, was to kind of add into this sort of feminine side that I didn't know was there. And that was really an important component of sort of balancing the pendulums. I would show up very masculine in a lot of ways, certainly with work, in trying to overachieve and feel like I belonged, especially being a woman in sports. There's a certain level of pressure, expectations, that you want to meet because you feel so lucky and privileged to even be in those four walls with the types of athletes or talent that exists in those production meetings. And I think for me, when you ask the word catalyst, you've seen me through the hardest 2 years of my life. And I appreciate your reflection in that because of what you always, try to bring out in people and your abundance of curiosity. In fact, actually, when we were in Hawaii together, I remember saying to you, I'm like, I don't think I've ever been asked questions this way before. As the broadcaster and the reporter and sort of the more curious one, it was really nice to have someone witness and genuine curiosity with my experience. So that was really amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah. And the
I'm super curious.
Yeah. You're so curious. And I think that's what I've learned, right? Actually, is to be curious about the things that we may have judged before about ourselves. Just observe more.
Ooh, I love that. That's interesting because to me, that curiosity towards ourselves versus judgment is really almost like a container for a softening, right? So if we're meeting ourselves with curiosity versus judgment, it kind of automatically allows us space to soften because we're relating with ourselves in that way and holding ourselves in that way that it's almost like a mothering of ourselves.
Yeah. And, I think the reflections I get that I'm doing the work and I'm on the path of self-trust is when other people trust me and can feel vulnerable with me and can kind of lean into this. I think all of us, specifically the professional sports world, which is what I can relate to, and I can only speak on my experiences, but what I've seen is this like unattainable perfection with performance that the athlete or the broadcaster or the high performer experiences in the professional world. And so to me, I've learned that although my job tends to focus on the winner or the champion, there can be so much wisdom learned when we lose and we struggle with adversity. And for instance, let's take a pro athlete who sustained an injury mid-season. Aaron Rodgers, a good example of that. That loss of identity, that you're now on the sideline and you have to watch your team either win or lose, and you can't really contribute like you've been doing your entire life. I mean, these athletes from the age of 5 or 6 are the anointed ones in their family, where they've been gifted this like unbelievable talent, and then also add on top of their work ethic that that's all they know about themselves. Yeah. Right? So that's the exchange that I can so relate to, because for me growing up, I just wanted to feel like I mattered. Yeah. And that I was, and then that meant success. Mm-hmm. And that meant external, right? And so, you know, you've asked me about plant medicines and all of that, and one of the things I learned when I did it, and I shared with you, was how much I was actually transacting in the external, right? Mm-hmm. Career, looks, money, access, that made me feel valuable. Yeah. Rather than the actual Erin, who was all these other great qualities that I didn't think were cool to transact with.
You said like a lot of really interesting things, but one thing that's standing out is you mentioned when an athlete is injured and they're sort of forced to put down their identity. That I think you were saying it almost as in that's been the context for a lot of your growth. So are you saying that you've seen how being kind of forced to put aside your identities or give up some of your identities has caused you to really grow?
Oof. I mean, think about whether it's the career or the loss of my father or a breakup. Mm-hmm. What I've learned through my grief, and it took me a long time to get here, mm-hmm. was that now I have an abundance of space. My question is, and I asked this to myself, I actually journaled it last night because it was my dad's birthday yesterday, 2 days ago.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And I said 2 questions. What have I learned from you, Dad? Mm-hmm. And what have I learned from your loss? And I think I've learned an immense amount from who he was as a person. He was super silly and goofy, and he would say fart jokes in the middle mm-hmm. of dinner, and it would just get so awkward, and I loved it. And he was just a dork. And that's what I hope to embody more of as I get more comfortable in my own skin, which is a daily practice. But I've also learned just as much through his loss and what fills into your life when you have space now, mm-hmm. right? So the athlete that's now injured, that has to watch his or her team from the sideline, space has been created. Mm-hmm. And although it's the hardest thing to have to go through, perhaps it might be one of the most transformative of their existence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's space that opens up, and perhaps even within that space, you can see or be guided to seeing a new way or a new path.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I'm a proponent of plant medicine, mm-hmm. because I think, you know, when you get still, how often are we just putting the phone down and not distracting ourselves for 8 hours? I mean, mm-hmm. that alone is actually medicine, right? Mm-hmm. If you just put the phone away and you just chill, and they say meditate is great. Mm-hmm. Meditating is great. But then you add in like plant medicines, or you add in any kind of therapeutic. This is why I'm such an advocate for mental health in my industry, because we don't really put the tools down. I mean, we're always sort of like navigating on how to get from here to here. And by the way, I do it too. Mm-hmm. I'm also the problem. I'm always like, okay, now let's strategize on how I can achieve just a little bit more. And I think when we can get still, we can find a little bit more moments of grace for ourselves and look back and have compassion. And I think Aaron Rodgers said it best: when you have compassion for yourself, then that starts to really leak out into the world, and you have compassion for everyone else.
Yes.
We all just want like the corny thing of love and acceptance, guys. It's
oh my
so
gosh.
Easy, but it's not. It's so hard.
This I believe so strongly in what you're saying, that I actually believe that the world can be, and it's actually an idea I have of something I want to write on, but the world can be healed through self-compassion. because that's exactly right. And obviously the way we relate with ourselves is the way we relate with every the cause of the way we relate with everything else. Yes, and always it starts within.
Yeah,
That's
but
so.
we don't know we have a problem. That's the thing,
Mm,
right? We don't know we have a problem because we're operating from the patterns our parents taught us or our,
unconsciousness. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So
So.
it really, it takes loss, in
Hmm.
my experience,
Hmm.
that when we go back to your original question with Catalyst,
Hmm.
it took dramatic, painful loss where I wanted to be the victim. I'm the victim,
Hmm.
feel bad for me. And then it's
Hmm.
interesting, we did a plant medicine journey not that long ago, and someone had lost their wife and didn't even bring that up. And I was like, wow,
Hmm.
that's amazing. Because I'm not my story of the things that have happened to me. I
Hmm.
am who grows from those
Hmm.
experiences. That's who Erin is,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think there is a place for story along the way. It's a process of it's going from unconscious to conscious, and there is a place where we actually get conscious and look at the stories we're telling and look at the patterns we're living, and then there's a place to then evolve through those things. But yeah, the loss piece is, yeah, that can be a big catalyst. And not for me, it was like almost my whole young adulthood of not getting what I thought I wanted, and just kept compelling me more deeply into like looking at myself and really bringing my awareness to what was going on.
The sexiest thing I think anyone can do
Mm,
is when they can call out their own shit.
mm-hmm,
That is the
mm-hmm,
hottest thing someone could do, is when they go, you know what, like, I was really feeling insecure about this, and I'm sorry if that I put that on you,
yeah,
right? And it's so accountable. And
yeah,
you don't know you're projecting, and I think I did an interesting session, a relationship masterclass with a very awesome somatic therapist, and he was suggesting that like triggers, like healing is a 3.5 pause in reacting. Whereas, like, you say something that bothers me, and instead of coming back at you with a retort or a defensive
mm-hmm,
mechanism,
mm-hmm,
I take 3.5 seconds and just marinate on
mm-hmm,
that. And by the way, hard as fuck to do.
mm-hmm,
Hard, hard to
mm-hmm.
do,
Totally.
but
Yeah.
willing to do it if you want to raise your own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you raise the relationships and your friendships and the way you live, So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's personal responsibility, and good, bad, or ugly, I don't know. It's actually the only way to change. So whether or not we like it or we think it's right or wrong, the only way for me to change anything is for me to take full responsibility of my life. And same for everyone else, but not always
And that
easy.
was one of the things that you, because you're such an amazing life coach, you hold great space for people.
Thank you.
And I forget if it was, I think it was when we went on a hike.
Mm,
But you were like, I care about how I look.
mm.
And I was like, wow, she said it. Oh my God, that's amazing. She said it. I care about how I look. And because you said it,
Uh-huh.
personal accountability,
Yeah.
right? I was like, I felt seen. And so then
Yeah.
I like, it opened up. And so here's what I learned from you in doing that.
Mm,
It's actually, and because I respect you and I admire you, and you
hmm.
say it with like a sense of comfortableness within yourself, because
Yeah.
you healed parts of
Hmm.
yourself. I hope to be that for other people, like
Hmm.
young girls who
Hmm.
work in my industry or want to work in my industry or have felt imposter syndrome or not good enough. It's totally okay to admit when you feel insecure or undervalued. And I think that's really potent in getting comfortable with sort of the wounds that you have and how you transact with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I was an actress, the beginning of my career, and coming from that world, it's very interesting. It can be tough. And when I started doing videos on social media, I was like, I know that I care about this. I'm clear within myself and I actually like love it. I get a kick out of it and I have a lot of acceptance and compassion for myself there. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to let go of the idea that I'm pretty. Otherwise, it's just never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be able to get a video and think that it's good enough or that I look pretty enough. Because it's not. It's never perfect, right? So I was just like, I'm gonna have to just get over that and let it go. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's so interesting that it can be a taboo thing to admit that you care, but I do.
I think it's
Yeah,
hot. I think it made you hotter,
thanks.
actually. So I think it made you so much hotter because, I think one of the things I've learned through this challenging last, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, is when I started going into the journeys, I was like, oh, wow, I'm not as fucked up as I thought I was, and
Hmm.
you get this like immense group vulnerable share, which is why I think group therapy is awesome.
Hmm.
I think doing, I think if it's in your wheelhouse to do plant medicine, I so subscribe to it.
Hmm.
Because here's my thing, my relationships have gotten so much better. I love that people call me and trust me and know that they're safe,
Hmm.
right? Like I think that's what your number one component that people feel and why they work with you is because at the end of the day they know your team them
Hmm.
and you make them feel safe, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
huge, I think.
Yeah. Thanks. So what do you think it is that allows someone to feel safe? Or what is it for you?
um Good question. I think let me answer it this
Hmm.
way, how I try to make other people feel safe
Hmm.
is by adopting this mirroring and magnetizing of
Mm.
other people's
Thanks, Andrew.
goodness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one of the things I just recently lost a girlfriend, and one of the things that she was so magnetizing and magical about,
Hmm.
I'll give you a great example of one of the things that she would do. She would call me, we'd catch up, how you doing, da da da. Hey, I was recently with Sally, and Sally said this like nice thing about you.
Mm.
And I'm like, that means so much. When I know my dad was that way too. He
Hmm.
would always repeat nice things said by other people when I'm not
Hmm.
around. And women, it's a different energy than maybe male friends, because you're always hoping they take care of you when you're not there.
Yeah.
And my number one resource for trying to make someone feel safe with me is
Hmm.
trust. And
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
and so whenever I get those opportunities of like, oh, wow, Stevie said this nice thing about Deanna and
Hmm.
you weren't there,
Hmm.
I would try to make sure I told you. Like, oh my God,
Love
Steve said
that.
this nice thing. And I think that's huge,
Yeah.
right? I think
Yeah.
that to me is really important. Like community, we can't get there alone. And
Hmm.
I think if we foster and soften and love and make people feel included, there's a
Hmm.
safety component to that.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. For me, especially I'm conscious of this all the time, or I try to be anyway. I'm obviously going unconscious sometimes. But certainly when I'm working with people professionally, one of the things that I'm very aware of is what's mine
Mhm.
and putting that aside, and so that I am able to see and reflect clearly versus projecting, which is putting my stuff on. And I don't ever want to do that, certainly in a professional context or anywhere. But to me, that feels very unsafe. And the more I can put what's mine aside and just be a clear mirror, I think that provides more safety.
Yeah. And the way maybe you've done that is you're trying not to judge yourself, right? Because
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
that's the big one for me
Yes. Yes. Yes.
is like,
Yes.
ooh, I'm feeling this thing. This person said this thing. I'm feeling this thing. Like
Mhm.
that's not really their, like, what's happening for me that's making me feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really getting,
I love that you just tied that back. Yeah, because if you can be in compassion for yourself, then then you're not in, oh, let me like get this pain away from me and put it on someone else. It's like, no, I've got me. I can be with myself in this. Yeah,
yeah. And
love
that's
it.
another thing you've definitely taught me is a sense of self-soothing that I think the last 2 years, although they've been very transformative, I'm super aware of how much I avoid and distract. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
still really working on that. And it's like, I just always want to stack my schedule. Like right before here, I squeezed in a workout. I look sweaty, which is fine.
You look
But I'm
great.
like, I gotta like stop this. It's like, I'm definitely afraid of the sitting with myself part. I mean, I'm still
Mm-hmm.
working on that. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably something I need
Yeah,
to work on.
I think, oh, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
I think, yeah, I think a lot of people work with that.
Yeah.
And also because possibly our society really encourages that sense of busyness
Hmm.
and I'm doing things. Oh, you're so busy. Good job. And I know there's a lot more awareness coming to that now, but certainly I think it's still really encouraged to be like busy.
Well,
So,
and even take it to the mindset of the
mhm,
athlete, right? The athlete, their whole life, and I was an athlete growing up, so I recognize this, or it resonates with me.
mhm,
But the athlete, since basically inception, right? Like there's this skill set that they have or this talent that they have. They've been coached and told what to do their whole life. They've been given
yeah,
routine their whole life. So then when they retire,
mhm,
and I've never retired from pro football, so I can't speak
yeah,
on this. However, when that structure gets taken away, I mean, that's why hard things happen, right? That's why
mhm.
there's a increase in depression, or even suicide and anxiety and all of these things, because they've not necessarily tapped into who they are on the inside. They've only felt worth and value by what they're contributing on the football field or the baseball diamond or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So you are really focusing on mental wellness in with athletes, with retiring athletes, and opening up that conversation quite a bit with what you're doing now and where your focus is. So, is there something specific that's compelled you in that direction?
I mean, my own struggle, my
Yeah.
own trauma, my own, the year I lost my dad, I left the Raiders. And
Hmm.
that was a very hard, painful experience, because I I almost needed that job to just continue
It's
to
okay.
let me distract from the pain I was feeling with my loss. And look, like I had a very close relationship with my dad. My dad was he was like Steve Martin and Robin Williams had a baby. So he was like the
Mm.
big joy in my life that really loved people. So he kind of taught me how to just sort of be goofy, be silly, and
Hmm.
make things really light like that. So when I lost him, I was in massive darkness. I was so sad, and I
Hmm.
wanted more distraction from his loss, from the reality of his loss. And
Yeah.
a lot at that time was taken away that forced me. I mean, and I guess it's a good thing, but it forced me to really have to look inward, and I couldn't really distract myself as much. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was one of the things that brought this to
yeah.
your awareness? Like, I wonder what it's like for these athletes when they're going through these huge changes and wanting
It
to bring more.
it it, sh- it showed me that maybe what I was going through, other people were possibly going through, like
Hmm.
I said, with whether it's a retirement or an injury, like a season ending injury, or a, God forbid, career ending injury.
Hmm.
I really felt their I felt compassion for if that was what they may be going through. And then, you I've been doing more interviews with athletes. Like I recently interviewed a hockey player, an enforcer, named Riley Cote. He's got a really great documentary on E60 on ESPN, or maybe it's 30 for 30, and it's called Peace of Mind. And he was a hockey enforcer. When he retired, he said he would fight out of fear, and then hung up, retired, and went into this sort of downward spiral. And now, which is amazing, he got help, and now he's doing these medicinal mushroom retreats in Jamaica, and he's helping former pro athletes to kind of recover from the same thing. So that was really enlightening to hear his perspective and how he talks so openly. And then now he's actually helping people just like him who, and I asked him, I said, what do you recommend? Like, what do you, he's like, you know what? Like, go play the drums. Go tap into something that's like sort of the opposite of what you do for a living, right? Like sort of initiate something creative. And I always thought, I was like, I'm not that creative. I cover sports. It's like black and white. But I love to write. I love to have these types of conversations. I'm trying to pick up the guitar, but I still suck. So,
That's great. I think it's so good to have creative outlets, or just to have things that we do just because we want to do it, just for the heck of it, versus like, I need to like get something out of this.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, how can I just enjoy things rather than need it to be like, I was so focused on the outcome, I wasn't enjoying the process. So
Yeah, totally. So is there anything specific that you're wanting to go, or a specific direction you're wanting to go with the conversation you're having and with athletes and mental wellness right now?
Yes, there is. I really want to create some kind of forum, some kind of place for, because see, here's the thing. I think I'm using the athlete story as the conduit for just people like me who have struggled with identity when they were young, feeling the need to like prove themselves or make someone else proud. And then that's what guided them, right? There's a great song that I just recently played called Daydream, and she talks about how this musician artist talks about, and I'm sure maybe it's about her, that she has like this beautiful angel voice, but all she does is sing it in the shower because she's so afraid of failing. She's failing to even try. And I'm like, dude, resonates, all that stuff resonates. I think just writing lyrics, even if I don't play them, probably would make me feel good. So I think at the end of the day, I just want more storytelling and more vulnerability. And like you said, if we can have more self-compassion, we could maybe heal more of the world.
Absolutely. Cool. So you're such a seeker. You're always looking for the next level. You're going deeper and deeper. And you grew up here in LA, where it's not typically known as deep, although I know there's lots of deep people here, certainly that I've met. Um, have you always been that way? Have you always been a seeker? Or was it again through like the tough things you've gone through that led you there?
I think I was always someone that had a sense of tenacity. I think I always felt like there I always felt I was able to achieve a lot. I didn't feel limited. I felt limitless with my career. However, what I'm learning, and when we had this women's dinner that you came to for women in business not that long ago, one of the things that's deeply resonated with me was I needed to get to the top of the mountain as fast as I could. It's really lonely at the top of the mountain when you're by yourself. And so when I was young, I think I felt lonely a lot. I think I felt like I only cared about Erin. I only cared about, and by the way, I've healed some of this because why did I just, I had brothers that were a little bit hard on me. I was like the working class family in a really wealthy neighborhood. So I needed to sort of find like this success to make me feel like I belonged. So I always felt like I was going to be something important
Mm-hmm.
but it was to overcompensate for not feeling important when I was young,
Yeah.
or not feeling like I had a voice when I was young. And so, one of our close friends has said, "I'm a recovering LA native," and
Mm.
I think that's potent to admit, because growing up here, you see the way people transact, and you think that's what I want to be.
Mm.
And then you get it,
Mm.
and then you're still not happy. So I think I've learned in growing up in LA,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much
Hi,
better.
Devin.
It's so much more like great. It feels like it's so much more fulfilling when like I help someone up on that mountain,
Yeah.
like because it's just so much,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I grew up fairly
Yeah.
opposite of LA, but I've been here. I've been here for a while now. So, yeah, definitely. What are you excited about?
I am actually excited and scared for my future.
Mm.
Like I think, one of the things I was talking about with a friend is when we're so in control of how the future looks, we're blocking the universe from like just giving us, you talk about surrender.
Hmm.
What happens when you surrender? You just like start to notice things that you never really noticed before. So I'm like in this really weird place where I'm
Hmm.
super excited about what the future holds for me, because my intentions, as I've learned through my loss, is just transact with love. I know that sounds so cheesy, but just do it.
It
So,
sounds freaking amazing. It sounds
right.
amazing. Yes, I love it. I love it. I mean, always focused on surrender, but especially recently, it's been a big. I was just listening to the song "It Is Well with My Soul" before this, which I love. It just helps me like let go.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Love talking with you.
I mean, I could do this with you all day. I
Yeah,
love talking with you, and
yeah.
your Instagram videos and messaging always relate to me and
Hmm.
with what I'm going through. So thank you
Thanks.
for doing
Of
this and prioritizing
course.
people's stories and experiences. And you're the conduit to like all of this amazingness that you're gonna
Oh,
have. So
thanks, Erin. I love you.
love you.
Yes, I'll see you soon.
Hey,
Thanks, guys, for joining.
thank you for
Yeah.
having me.